The following is a Comfortably Zoned radio network production.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Al Blumkin, and I'm on with my good friend David Nemec to another session of David Nemec's baseball trivia and history. Today, for a while, we'll be discussing the late Pirate shortstop Dick Groat, who influenced my life quite a bit. And then we're going to discuss the ending of the American National Leagues as we know it. Okay. David?
Pleasure to be with you once again, Al. As always, we enjoy ourselves, and hope people enjoy us.
Yeah. Okay. I mentioned Dick Groat, who passed away about a week and a half ago at the age of 92. And even though I knew that he was in not so good health, I was very, very saddened by this. I was in Pittsburgh as a freshman in 1960, and I was a Pirate fan back then, which is one of the reasons I went to that school. And the Pirates actually won the pennant and beat the Yankees in an incredible 7-game series, and a friend of mine and I were able to sneak in the bottom of the ninth for Game 7 when Bill Mazeroski hit the series-winning home run. In 1985, through a friend of mine, Dick Groat, after he retired, became the announcer for the Pitt basketball games. So a friend of mine and I went out one wintry evening in February 8th, 1985 in New Jersey to see him play Seton Hall. And this friend of mine who was, knew everybody introduced me to Dick Groat. So I asked Dick Groat whether or not I could interview him. He said, "Oh, fine, 2 weeks when we come in to play St. John's." So I interviewed him for several hours, and the date was February 23rd, 1985, a day I'll never forget. And he was very, very open and answered all the questions. We had a very, very nice discussion, and that led me to my first presentation at a SABR meeting, which was in New York, and I got so nervous I didn't know what I was doing, and people came up to me after the meeting and told me how much they liked it, so I took it out to the National in Oakland, and I did it in the afternoon. I had no nervous problems at all. That led me to my career and be able to do presentations, play trivia, and run a couple of national trivia contests. So it really, really had an impact. Passing really, really had an impact on me.
No,
hey, what do you remember about that, Dave?
I actually saw him before I saw him play with the Pirates. I saw him play another professional sport. I saw him playing with the Fort Wayne Zollner Pistons in the early 1950s. After he finished at Duke and played professional basketball for a year. Before his baseball career took off.
He played after his rookie baseball year.
He played after his rookie baseball year?
We had 52, 53, and he played 26 games and averaged 11.9 points a game, and this is before the shot clock.
Yeah, it was a very different game. And he was, but I did remember him. I did not really know. The Pirates in those years were very, as Al will tell you, as we go further into Groat's career, were a very, very bad team. I had seen them play earlier when they were a pretty good team, when they had Ralph Kiner and Greenberg and Frankie Gustine, Billy Cox, and a number of other good fairly good players like Danny Murtaugh, and I hadn't seen Dick play college basketball. Very few college basketball games were televised in Cleveland, where I'm living, except those that were played at Madison Square Garden. And there was a doubleheader usually every Saturday night for Madison Square Garden. And
they generally play the doubleheaders, college doubleheaders at Thursday nights.
At the
Garden, yeah, because the Knicks had Friday night was boxing. The Knicks had Tuesdays and Saturdays. The Ranger hockey team had Wednesdays and Sundays, and they usually had wrestling or something else on Mondays. But Thursday was the college basketball.
The reason I remember it on Saturday night,
maybe back maybe it's before I started getting into this.
It may have been, because I do remember seeing Saturday night basketball from Madison Square Garden. But I didn't see Dick. I don't think any of the Duke games were televised.
No.
And the NCAA then had a very small field. Unless you won your conference championship, you didn't go to the NCAA. And as a result, I don't think Dick. You may correct me if you know this, but I don't think Dick ever even played in the Garden in college basketball.
No, I doubt
play.
it. I never asked him that, but that's pretty easy to find out.
Yeah, I think so too. But he was a memorable professional basketball player, in my opinion. He was he looked very solid in his year, and I hadn't seen him play baseball. There weren't any National League games televised in Cleveland, and they would not have televised the Pirates in almost any, regardless, because of the quality of their team then. And it wasn't until later in the 50s, I think it was the summer of 1957, I went to Pittsburgh for a doubleheader and against the Phillies, and the Pirates won a doubleheader, and they pitched a number of obscure pitchers like Charlie Noreno and Fred Waters pitched in the doubleheader.
Oh, God.
They were very effective, and I saw him then for the first time as a Major League Baseball player, and I don't believe I did. I don't believe I saw him again, unless he might have been in a game against the Mets later in his career that I saw at Shea Stadium, but I don't recall it. So that may have been the only day I saw him play. I saw him play many times on television, and I thought he was a very impressive player and a marginal Hall of Famer. Given that he played on a championship team, he had a batting title to his credit.
He had two championship teams. He was on the '64 Cardinals also.
64 Cardinals were on the league. And so I thought he was a marginal leaguer. But shorts, if Louis Aparicio made it for his glove, and there really weren't too many shortstops then who went into the Hall of Fame. No, except Rizzuto and Boudreaux, because they were on championship teams and had fairly lengthy careers.
Reese also, yeah.
And Pee Wee Reese, yeah. Marty Marion never made it. He was another quality shortstop from that period.
Alvin Dark, yeah.
Alvin Dark never made it either. You're right. But
yeah. Anyway, when I interviewed Groat, we met for coffee, and I started throwing out names of his teammates some of his teammates on the '52 Pirates, which is his rookie year. That team won 42 games, and he said to me, "He said, you're prepared. I haven't heard some of those names in 30 years."
Yeah.
And so anyway, we got into discussion, and he after his rookie season, and as I mentioned, he played 26 games for the Pistons. He was drafted and did 2 years in the Army. And when he came out, the first year he The second year, in 1954, the shortstop was a player named Gare Alley who batted 199 for the season. So Groat comes out of the Army. And when he went into Ricky's office, he told Ricky he wanted to play both baseball and basketball. And at that time, the seasons didn't overlap the way they do now. And he brought up Gene Conley. And Ricky said to him that Conley was a pitcher and a backup. He says, you're weak playing 150 games for us and 45 minutes a game for them. You can't do both. And he went with baseball because that's where the money was at the time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, because there were a number of college. We talked about this actually very recently on a podcast. How many college players had a chance to? They were multiple. You know, they were good in multiple sports, and almost all of them went with baseball, with the exception of exceptional football players like Charlotte Triffy, who played in the Southern Association and did very well before, turning himself over totally to pro football and making the Hall of Fame subsequently. And that was a great player.
Yeah, so Groat became the regular shortstop when he came back from the Army in 1955, and he played 8 years there. And in 56 and 57, the Pirates started to get a little better. Clemente came along. Mazeroski came in 1956. They got Verdon in a trade in 1956, and he had good years Groat had good years in 57 and 58. And then, the whole team went backwards a little bit in 1959. Then 1960, he won the batting title and was named National League MVP. He also told me he was an expert. One of his strengths was being very good at hit and run. And he said the reason he felt he had developed that was because he's always batting second, and he was slow. For his position player, he was a slow runner. So he said if he didn't learn to hit and run, he would have been hitting it to a lot of double plays. So that prevented that. And he also said that he knew how to play all the hitters when he was playing shortstop. So that wasn't a problem. It was in the class with two others I can think off the top of my head like that were Alvin Dark and Lou Boudreau.
Yeah.
Who were not exactly blessed with a very good range, but they knew how to play everybody. And he said Murtaugh
had incredible reflexes, and
he said Murtaugh insisted on the ABC plays. I asked him about what the atmosphere was after the Yankees blew them out in games 2 and 3 in the 60 World Series. He said, "Gentlemen, we're down 2-1. They don't pay you on how many runs you score."
Yeah.
And I also asked him if they did that, won a World Series like that was against any other American League team, would have meant that as much. He said no.
That's true. The Yankees were, they were just amazing in those years.
Yeah. And I asked him about the trade to the Cardinals. He said that he was having problems with the Pirate general manager, Joel Brown, who thought he couldn't play anymore, even though he had a good year in 1962. So they sent him to the Cardinals basically for a pitcher named Don Cardwell. And the Pirates went a cropper for 2 years because Brown thought Dick Schofield could play as a regular until they got Gene Alley in 1965 to stabilize the position. So he said the three years in St. Louis was very, very enjoyable. And he played with Musial during Musial's last season, and then was on the team that won the World Series in 1964, again beating the Yankees at 7 games. And one of the things I asked him about was his reaction to the Brock Broglio trade in 1964. And he said most of us were opposed to it. So Lou Brock comes to St. Louis. They put him in left field, and he tears the league up for the rest of that season. And some of the players asked him, "Well, what's with you?" He said, I escaped from jail when that trade was made because the Cubs had a college of coaches going on, which is one of the dumbest ideas in the history of baseball. And I asked him if he thought he belonged in the Hall of Fame. He said he didn't think so. He said the two teammates, not including Clemente, because he wasn't a teammate with Stargell, he said Mazeroski and Elroy Face belonged in.
No, he thought Face should be in. That's interesting.
Yeah. And I asked him what the worst ballpark he ever played in because he never played in the minors. He said nothing compared to Colts Stadium.
Yeah.
He said that place, we were lucky we got out of there every 3 days. He told me he knew from some other players that general managers would threaten to send them to Houston if they acted up.
Yeah. No, it was. Yeah, that's why they built the Astrodome. It was just too hot to play there. Yeah. And
it was like a football.
I have a question. I'm probably sure some of our listeners would like to know too. What Dick thought of Johnny Keane, who was actually became. He didn't
want to go into that.
He did
not like him because Keane didn't like the hit and run. He didn't like a couple of other things that Keane did. It was a very, very touchy relationship.
Huh.
Yeah, coming from Danny Murtaugh to Johnny Keane, they said was, and I was very positive, because the only question I asked him that, was what he thought would have happened if Dick Stewart was playing first base in Game 7 instead of Rocky Nelson when Berra hit the ball that when Nelson made the out and Mantle dove back into first base.
Right.
And Groat said, let's not go there. But it was just a wonderful, wonderful thing. I couldn't believe that I actually did this. And as I said before, it led to my doing quite a lot of public speaking and overcoming my fear of doing that.
Yeah.
And make people understand that I was just not just a trivia player.
That's great that you got him because and your career. I mean, it really helped you too. And because you've given a lot of presentations that I've enjoyed over the years, and you were a formidable trivia player. Even before that. One of his very, very best. And
the only after I stopped after 1999, the only regret I had was never beating you. It took me a while to get over that.
Yeah, well, we had some great competitions though.
Oh yeah.
I really enjoyed those every bit as much as and some of the other stuff at Sabre. It was the conventions were great.
It's funny because somebody asked me what my single greatest moment was, and I said the Branch Rickey answer here in 1991.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's those teams in those years. The National League and American League, and this kind of does lead us into what we're going to discuss next.
Yeah.
They really were separate entities, and I growing up in Cleveland, of course, was an American League fan, and was fortunate enough to, while at a time when I first came to understand baseball, how the game was played, and appreciate its complexity and beauty. Lo and behold, the Cleveland Indians won the World Series, and to imagine then that never again in my lifetime would I see the two things blend in the same year, a World Series championship and a pennant, which may very well may come to pass. Who would have thought at the time? What was more importantly, what I wanted to say is that the National League was regarded as, it was haloed in a way that probably the American League was in National League cities. You just didn't get to see those players, the National League teams, play unless you happen to get to an All-Star game live or a World Series game live, and usually those involve the Yankees. So many.
Yeah, and that's why the All-Star games back then were so big.
Yeah. The Yankees were the only team you ever get. No matter how many World Series you went to, you were still going to miss the rest of the American League teams because, except for Cleveland, between 1947 and White Sox.
1958 was the last year for the last year, before the Yankees, the White Sox came in.
Yeah,
1959.
Yeah, exactly. And, Cleveland won it in 48 and 54, but and the White Sox not till 1959 did another American League team win it. So, and as a result, going to a National League game, going and seeing players like Sam Musial and Ralph Kiner and Alvin Dark and I did get to the World Series in '48. I saw Vern Bickford start a game in Cleveland. Vern Bickford is a forgotten name now, but at the time he was a pretty good pitcher and had several quality seasons in the majors, mostly with the Braves, and I remember seeing him pitch. But a lot of people never had the pleasure of seeing a crossover game between, if they were American League fans, seeing a National League team play. And as I said, the All-Star game on television and the World Series games in the fall were the only time you got to see, a team from the opposite league, players from the opposite league actually in action. So, but I think what we're coming to now, and it's going to happen very soon, is the word destruction is not too strong for me. It will be the destruction of the leagues as separate entities, and they're going to. They've already blended it together in the rules.
It's going to be geographic realignment.
Yeah,
and I've already spaced what the realignment is going to look like when that happens.
Yeah. And whether it's going to be on the order of the National Football League, where you're going to have, four separate divisions, and
basically, if they add two teams to make it 32, then they'll have 8 4-team divisions like the NFL, and they'll have 16 teams in the playoffs, and the World Series will start in late November at some neutral or warm weather site.
Yeah, I think that's probably likely to happen, and I don't really like it. I think 4-team divisions. Baseball's a long season. In football, generally the best team in the division in a short season will win the division. There will be one team that will emerge. It's not always a team with an above 500 record either. But I think it's what's going to happen in baseball. There are going to be years when teams, as could have happened in 1994, if the strike hadn't intervened, a team with a below 500 record could have qualified for postseason play because the Rangers were leading their division at the time, and they were below 500. And I think that's going to happen frequently if Major League Baseball goes to 14 divisions. That a below 500 team will get into the playoffs, and with a couple of breaks and a couple of outstanding performances from their pitchers, they could go all the way. And
the thing is, if they stay with 30 and there's no bringing in two more teams, you're going to have a situation like the NBA, which is essentially aligned geographically. So, in the East, they'll have a division with the Yankees, the Mets, the Phillies, the Red Sox, and Toronto. Then you'll have the Pirates, the Indians, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Detroit. No, Cleveland, and I think they put the White Sox in there because the Cubs and the Cardinals have to be together. And you'll have in the South, you'll have Washington, Baltimore, the Marlins, the Rays, and the Braves. And then you go out and you have the second division in the West, and you're going to have the Cubs, the Cardinals, the Astros, the Cubs, Cardinals, Twins, Astros, and Rangers. No, I'm messing it up a little bit.
Where are you going to put Detroit if you put the White Sox in?
No, Detroit's in with Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Detroit and the Pirates.
Detroit and the Pirates. So it's not going to be the White Sox then. So the White Sox.
I think you put the White Sox in with Minnesota, Milwaukee, Kansas City, the Cubs and the Cardinals. We'll put the two white Chicago teams in the same division. Then you'll have Texas, Houston, Denver, Phoenix, and Seattle, and the other one, and the last one, you got the Dodgers, Giants, Padres, Angels, and A's. Of course, if the A's move to Las Vegas, Seattle will come in there, and Las Vegas will go to the other one. But to me, it's a simple geographic realignment, and I've been screaming about that ever since they announced this everybody playing everybody schedule.
Huh.
They'll probably call one American and one national just to keep the names out there, but
Well, it'll be like in football. It'll be the conferences. Yeah, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I just don't agree with. I wish they wouldn't do it. I like and I was even and people live really for the almost the entire 20th century, and there were different rules in it, and the two leagues didn't have the same rules all the time, and they certainly didn't have the same strike zone.
Oh yeah, the umpires in the National League with the inside protector, and the American League umpires with the outside protector.
That had a lot to do with what the strike zone was in each individual league. And as was true with players, you didn't see certain umpires unless you went to an All-Star game or a World Series game, because the National League umpires umpired their way, and American League umpires umpired their way. And there are some incredible things, and no one's ever explored the late 1940s to the early 1950s. The difference in the strike zone between the American League and the National League must have been really remarkable.
The American League, I have a passion for the American League for 48, 49, and 50.
Yeah,
because the American League was unbelievable.
Yeah, year after year. Yeah, and that's why the A's set the record, of course, for the most double plays in 49. We had so many base runners. There were so many walks up by A's pitchers. And
there was somebody posted the Pete Suter picture of Pete Suter a few weeks ago. So I put down the thing that he had the most games played by any A who never played for another team.
Yeah.
And I put down, they set the record for double plays, but they had 5 pitchers that walked over 100 hitters. So there was an awful lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
And both 49 and 50 in the American League, only one team each time had a pitching staff with more strikeouts than walks.
Yeah.
And that was very low.
I know.
To say the least.
No,
National League wasn't as bad. And then, another theory I have is that when a war starts, one of our conflicts start, the hitting goes down the toilet.
Yeah.
So 1952, which was an incredible pitchers year, basically the same cast of characters from 1950 were, the pitchers were having really successful years, and the hitters, there was quite a number of hitters that had their peak years in 1950. That even players like Yogi Berra, George Kell, Tom DiMaggio, Phil Rizzuto, Hank Bauer, Larry Doby never had seasons like that afterwards, as far as batting average is concerned.
Yeah.
But you're right. There's an awful lot of difference. And, of course, the big difference when the American League was formed was the implementation of the foul strike rule.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that lasted until 1903. And American League batting averages were higher every year in the National League. And when the two leagues finally merged and it came to an agreement not to rate each other and do all kinds of other nasty little things, and the rules were basically made the same, but there were still, many years. There was a difference in the balk rule. When a balk was called, I believe in the American League, when a balk was called, when a pitch was delivered, the team at bat had an option of taking the result of the pitch or the balk. And the National League, the team was forced to take the balk. And that denied Nippy Jones a home run in 1949. It was very instrumental, with all probability, in deciding what the National League pennant. The Cardinals had an opportunity to tie for the National League pennant in the last day of the season, and they lost it because Nippy Jones' home run was nullified because a balk was called before the pitch was delivered. And I think one of the guys from the Mexican League band, pitcher Zavala. Yeah. He was pitching for the Giants, I believe, and a balk was called on him. He delivered the pitch. Jones homered on it, and the homer was erased by the balk. And a St. Louis runner moved up a base, ended up not scoring. St. Louis lost the game, and they lost the pennant. By I think a 1-game margin, if I'm not mistaken.
In 1963, the National League decided that they had to come to a 1-second. Pitchers had to come to a 1-second stop, and they were ordered to call balks. So the umpire said, "You want balks? We'll give you balks."
Yeah.
And they called so many. I think Bob Shaw, who was a pitcher on the Braves at the time, set some sort of record for balks. And finally, the powers that be in the National League relented.
Yeah.
And the DH, of course, when that came in, and not too many people know that that was first proposed by the National League in the 20s to offset the power and drawing potential of Babe Ruth.
Yeah, 1928, if I'm not mistaken. I think John Heidler tried to get it through and failed. And would have been interesting if it had gone into effect then, because the careers of certain players would have been vastly changed, because there were Wes Farrell in the American League was a very, very good hitter, and actually played a few games in the outfield and was definitely a pinch hitting threat. And Red Lucas set National League pinch hitting records. If he could have actually probably been a DH, and he, as it was, he batted for himself, of course, when he was a starting pitcher, and he was used frequently as a pinch hitter. And Red Ruffing was another terrific hitter. There were guys who really extended their careers and definitely helped pad their pitching stats by the fact that they were never taken out for pinch hitters. And Farrell, Ruffing, and Lucas come to mind immediately, but I know there were more that also were very. I think George Yulee was a very good hitter, and these guys were, and they had careers as a result. So did Walter Johnson have a great career as a hitter, and if the DH had been in effect, their prowess as hitters would probably never have emerged, and the public who saw them in those years would have been denied. And there are guys now, I'm sure, in the major leagues, there were guys who were very, very good hitters in high school and probably went into college playing multiple positions, who now are strictly pitchers and oftentimes only relief pitchers and can only see an inning or two or just a few batters and never get to hit.
Well, they passed the Ohtani rule before last season that if he comes out of the game as a pitcher, he can still play as a DH.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Next time you update the rule book, that's you could. It's I don't know what the number is of the rule, but it's the Ohtani rule, as it's called, because he's the only one that affects right now.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that does help, certain guys, other guys too, because I know there are guys. I have a nephew who's a very good hitter. He's pitching in college, and he's not used as a DH at all. And he sometimes doesn't even hit for himself in games he pitches, and it's unfortunate because I think you're taking away a skill from a player at an early age that he may need to, later in his career, in order to extend his career. Once his arm goes, there are a number of players who converted from pitching to the outfield. Who leaps to mind immediately is Reb Russell, who was a fine pitcher with the White Sox in the teens, and his arm he went down to the minors and extended his career as an outfielder and came back up to the Pirates in 1922 as an outfielder and had the most incredible half season probably in Major League history. He wasn't as good the following year and went back down to the minors, but it definitely extended his professional career by probably as much as half a dozen or even 10 seasons. And pardon me? Two that come to mind immediately is Smokey Joe Wood and Lefty O'Doul. Yeah, right, exactly. There are two others. O'Doul really was never going to make it as a pitcher, and he did end up as a hitter. And Buzz Arlett was another. Arlett began as a terrific pitcher. He was buried in the Coast League because at that time players made as much money staying out in the coast as they did in the majors, that they were coming up with cash poor teams. Major league teams they weren't going to get paid as much as they did if they stayed in the coast. So Buzz Arlett spent most of his career in the Coast League, and a lot of it as a pitcher. And he also played the outfield. Then he started playing both the outfield and pitching, and then he became strictly an outfielder by the time he made the major leagues for one season. I believe it was 1931.
I read an interview in a book I have with Ferris Fain, and Ferris Fain said he had to take a pay cut when he went from the San Francisco Seals in the Coast League to the Philadelphia A's.
Yeah, that was true for, I think, Joe Brovia too, who played a year with partial season with the Reds. He was paid very well in the Coast League, and he was very happy when he didn't stick with the Reds. He was over 30 by the time he got up, and he really wasn't as effective as he was early in his career, and went back down to the Coast League and finished his career. I think he finished it there. But it
was all different. I mean, the cash poor teams in the American League were the Browns, the A's, and the Washington Senators, and not so much in the National League. The Phillies for years were very, very cash poor, and those teams in the 30s and early 40s until after World War II, they had to get rid of any player who was any good just to keep the operation going.
Exactly. Yeah, and the Yankees took advantage of course, with Kansas City in the 50s, but the Red Sox also took advantage of it in the 1940s with the Browns.
And they took advantage in the 1950 with Washington.
And with Washington, yeah. So it wasn't just the Yankees that were able to do it; it was the Red Sox too. And the Red Sox didn't make the best choices or the best. They got Jackie Jensen though, and Washington would love to have kept Jensen, but they would have had to pay him. And Jensen started to produce. He was originally with the Yankees and went to the. Did he go in the Porterfield trade or what trade?
No, he went. He was traded when the Yankees got Irv Noren.
Irv Noren, okay.
Yeah, they sent him and Spec Shea and Jerry Snyder and his player Archie Wilson, who was did nothing, and Washington immediately traded him to the Red Sox. But the thing is that Stengel didn't. It came down to a choice for Stengel between Jensen and Mantle, and they decided to keep Mantle. And they got Pete Runnels for nothing. They got from the Washington. They got quite a number of players.
Why did they decide? Well, Jensen wasn't really a center fielder, though. So, that trade didn't make sense to me at the time, and I don't think it. It really didn't make sense because because Noren, Jensen by himself emerged as a much more significant figure in the 50s than Noren did.
Yeah. Well, I did a podcast with Noren and Ralph Tycho a number of years ago, and I asked him how he was never one of my favorites. He hit .319 in 1954, which is way out of his normal range.
He was actually right up with Avila for the league lead for deep into the season.
Because of that, they traded Gene Woodling to Baltimore when they got Bartoli and Don Lawson. And Woodling would have some very good years left, and Noren wasn't even on the team at 56 in the World Series.
Yeah.
And but I asked Noren, how do you feel about being a full-time player at Washington and going to becoming a platoon player with the Yankees? He said those World Series checks made it worth it. Huh.
Yeah.
But the thing is that in the National League, to some extent, the Dodgers operate the Cubs like that.
Yeah.
They once sold Chuck Connors and Dee Fonda, both of whom were first basemen, to the Cubs at the same time.
Mm.
And then they stole Pafko. And my good friend, the late Eddie Gold, did a presentation at one of the Sabre meetings on bad Cub moves, starting with the Pafko trade from the Cubs to the Dodgers.
Yeah.
But that's the way it was, and they complain about. And what's ironic is that the Mets are paying more to Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer than the Tampa Bay is paying to the whole roster.
Oh man, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and Tampa Bay is 27-6.
That's incredible. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So that's where was Detroit at this time in 1984? They couldn't have been much better. They couldn't. Were they even as good?
They were 35-5.
They were 35-5. Okay, yeah. All right. So that to me is, at least in my lifetime, that is the most extraordinary start I remember to a season.
And MLB, I watch Quick Pitch every morning, which is this program for an hour that sums up everything that happened the day before. That's how I keep up with this stuff. And they said that the last team that had as good a home start as Tampa Bay was the 1897 Bean Eaters.
Wow.
Every other team on the list was 19th century.
Yeah, well, in 1884, St. Louis Union Association team started out 20-0 before they got beat by Tommy Bond, who was then on his last legs pitching with the Boston UA team, and Bond was pretty well pitched out. He only pitched a few more games that year, but that was his big victory, stopping their 20-0 streak to start the season. And of course, we both remember that season well.
Oh yeah.
Excuse me.
This guy Ed Acorn, author Ed Acorn wrote the book on the 1883 season, but his first book was on Horst Radbourn in 1984. 1884. They also had a pitcher. The Providence team also had a pitcher named Charlie Sweeney, who bolted to the UA midway through the season.
Yeah.
And Radbourn made the deal that if he pitched every game, he'd become a free agent after the season, which was unheard of at the time.
Yeah.
And also, one thing I wanted to ask you, I don't know if the listeners will be, care about this, but why did Tony Mullane cost himself 300 wins by signing 2 contracts and missing the 1885 season?
He did, and he also cost himself by jumping from the National League to the Montana State League. I believe it was in 1891 or 92, in the middle of the season when he was dominating the National League after it consolidated with the American Association. And he cost himself at least 10 wins, maybe as many as a dozen or 15. And that would have put him over 300 wins. So between the 1885 season, which he had to sit out in its entirety, and the season in the early 90s, and he skipped just left the National League, deserted the National League in mid-season to go out and play in the Montana State League because the issue was the National League cut its contract, they cut their contracts in mid-season, and players had no choice because they'd signed for because there's only one league at that time. And the National League took advantage, and Mullane jumped his contract. They welcomed him back, of course, in the following season, and he stayed in the National League from then on. But he was near the end, and he never got to 300 wins. And you're right, he would have been over 300 wins, and it would have meant that he, other than Pete Rose, of course, he is the only one who had either 300 wins, 3,000 hits, or 500 home runs. except for those who were accused of possible steroid use, and Pete Rose, who was banned for gambling. He is the only one who could. Mullane would have been the only one who's reached that hallmark figure. That
he was a pitcher.
Hall of Fame insurance would have made.
He was a pitcher.
He was a pitcher. He would have had 300 wins.
Yeah.
And he was also a pretty good hitter. He played at multiple positions. He played second base. He could play the outfield. He also was ambidextrous. He could pitch with his left arm, and did at times, and played the infield, particularly second base. He often played left-handed. He would be going to his left for a ground ball. He'd scoop it up barehanded and flip it to first base with his left arm. And he was a pretty good second baseman. And
one last thing before we have to go. Excuse me. In 1981, with the split season because of the strike that year, the Kansas City Royals made it to the postseason with a losing record.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
Because they won one of the half seasons.
Yeah, but they had a above 500 in that half season, though, didn't they?
No, they didn't.
They were below 500 both halves?
No, one half.
Their
overall record was below 500. Yeah.
Their total record was below 500.
Yeah, but they won the division in one of the halves, so they got into the playoffs. Yeah. They didn't make it out of the first round.
Okay, that's interesting. I don't remember that, but then they would have been the only team with a sub 500 record to make the postseason thus far. Yeah. But there are definitely, I think, going to be other teams in the near future who are going to be in the postseason if the leagues merge, as we're predicting they will, and merge their entities and become just one big league, like the National Football League did when it absorbed the American Football League. And I think that's going to be a tremendous loss for.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and new fans, recent fans, younger fans might welcome it, but those of us who've been around a few more years, I remember when the National League was, and really it was really a special treat to see a National League game if you were in American League. In an American League city and vice versa, if you were in a National League city, or an American League city and National League and so forth. But, it's whatever they decide to do, they decide to do, and they've already spoiled baseball stats as far as I'm concerned. Records.
Yeah, well, whatever they do, they'll screw it up. That's what they do.
They'll screw it up. It's going to be made worse. And, and you're mentioning the salaries, two guys on the Mets making more than the entire Tampa Bay roster. Well, Mike Trout is making more in one season than the entire American League made. Not only Trout now, but this guy with Anthony Rendon is making more in one season than the entire both major leagues made in 1961, and the entire rosters of all the teams in 1961, and it's incredible how baseball has changed. And
with these long-term contracts, and the guy turns out to be a stiff.
I know.
Hurt or injured all the time. They're paying them more. They're paying them tons and tons of money for not playing.
I know. It's crazy. It really is crazy. But
anyway, I won't be starting GoFundMe pages for the owners.
Yeah. It's
okay.
Great.
All right, we better get off before Ralph gets.
Yeah.
Okay,
right,
David, it's always a pleasure.
It really is. Yeah, and your work with Dick Groat is a treasure because he's a special guy, and you really presented him in depth and really given people a lot of joy and over the years with what you've done.
Thank you. You too. Okay, give my best to Marilyn.
I will, and we'll do this soon again. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.